The hype before a launch is always one of the most interesting things that I've experienced throughout my many decades of playing video games and my decade plus of covering video games. And there's no other company that gets me more excited when it comes to the JRPG front than Monolith Soft. And it seems like they are gearing up for something incredible and trying to top the monumentous task of beating out what they've done before with the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise. And what we've seen from Monolith Soft for the past 20 years is them constantly improving upon what they've done, using the groundwork that they laid 20 plus years ago at Squaresoft in order to build a legacy on what they did from Xenogears to Xenosaga, Xenoblade, and whatever is next. And from what they're saying here, it looks like we're going to get something that not only matches what our expectations are for Monolith Soft, but maybe even exceeds what we all thought was possible. So I want to get into that and maybe a few other things here. So let's go ahead and jump right into what Monolith Soft had to say about being satisfied or not in terms of the status quo and aiming for something even greater. Now, this was pretty cool to see this because they're going to be celebrating their 25th anniversary soon. And one of the founders, or more like the founders of Monolith Soft, talked about this and reflected on the company's success and looking forward to the future. Heck, even saying that they want to exist for another 500 years, so far beyond what we've even seen here, which is very fitting considering the story in Xenoblade Chronicles and how long it spans from all the different games and the lore and everything. So I think that kind of seeps into their DNA and their core functionality and what some of the founders want to do with this company. So here's what Mr. Sugira had to say recently about the studio and the company's ambitions in addition to the future. So this is upon looking back. Quote, "These 25 years seemed long but felt short. Looking back, I have built up so many memories that it's hard to pick one out. There have been so many twists and turns, but every time a problem comes up, we have faced it head on, and enduring them has led to what we are now. The amount of staff we have has risen dramatically compared to when we were founded in 1999, and we now have 3 development studios and have had a hand in many huge games. However, I do not believe we've had enough of the satisfaction that comes from success and achievement. This is definitely something Monolith Soft will pursue for as long as it exists, and perhaps may never be obtainable. If Monolith Soft were to continue existing, then we are still currently in the Genesis stage. I hope our company's history can keep going for 100, 200, or even 500 years. So I want to just briefly talk about what he had to say here before I get into the future goals and talking about what their next game is. So I think here, in terms of the success that they're talking about, Monolith Soft has never had a game that has sold 3 million units plus. They've clearly never been in the same category in terms of their own specific games that they develop. Now, they've worked on other games and have a huge hand in creating blockbuster games like Splatoon, for example, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Animal Crossing. They've helped out and been instrumental to Nintendo in making sure that these games are quality and that they get out there, and they definitely deserve credit for those games being massive sellers. But when it comes to Monolith Soft themselves and their own internally developed games, yes, they are a subsidiary of Nintendo, yes, they are first party, but remember, they still operate with their own company president and in their own buildings, so they still have that identity of their own just a bit, although they're adapted to Nintendo. They're looking for their own way of success, and they're looking for what they can do. Monolith Soft's quality when it comes to, like, let's say Xenoblade Chronicles 3 or Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, these games, they're so high, but they haven't been able to hit the 3 million plus mark. Now, I don't think 3 million or more all of a sudden equals super massive success, but I do feel that it would be the next step for Monolith Soft, and I think that's going to tie directly into what they're going to do next. And we're going to talk about that right after this next statement from him. So on future goals, he also had this to say: "Instead of being satisfied with the status quo, we keep aiming for higher quality. As I mentioned before, as long as Monolith Soft exists, our drive to never be satisfied with the status quo and aim for higher quality will never change. To that end, we are thinking about increasing efforts to lay the groundwork for an environment where new leaders can be born. Also, we want to keep being a company that makes customers happy. For example, beyond the framework, of just video games. We want to become a charismatic company, such as by expanding further into the realm of customer service. So essentially what that means is that there are no extra things with Monolith Soft's games. So let's just look at Xenoblade, for example. There are no real animes, there are no movies. I mean, there's merch, but not really anything big or official or anything like that. So they don't really have much outside of just, here are the games, here's what we do. I think that in the future, there's definitely an opportunity, especially with a more piece of capable hardware. And I want to get into this because I think that's where the Nintendo Switch 2 ties in, which we will talk about in just a bit more as well with some of the stuff Nintendo's planning to do. But I think that's where this ties in. Monolith Soft is a company that makes the most out of nothing or a small amount. They did the impossible on the Wii. They did the impossible on the Wii U. Heck, they even did to a degree the impossible on the Nintendo Switch. But when it comes to the Wii and the Wii U, even Nintendo's own internal developers did not have a grasp in terms of making world sizes as massive as what Monolith Soft could do, which is exactly the reason why Monolith Soft was purchased by Nintendo, because they knew that they could make these huge expansive RPGs and worlds and flesh them out. So Monolith Soft is one of Nintendo's development studios, to me, that can benefit most from having a nice bump in power and resources. They can take that extra power that they're given, they can take that extra resource and RAM and all of that and turn it into something that nobody even expected, or even better than what Nintendo could possibly even do with less developers too, with less people working on it. What they were able to accomplish with Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 was nothing short of miraculous on the Nintendo Switch. And even if you look at Xenoblade Chronicles X, still to me, that's the most impressive open world game that we saw in that generation, in my opinion, considering you can fly around massive scales with no loading time in the open world unless you go into the city. So that was an impressive feat, because nobody felt that you can even do that with the little amount of RAM and resources that the Nintendo Wii U had. Pretty strong graphics wise for the time, at least. Not necessarily the best, but not bad. But when it came to the CPU and when it came to the RAM, definitely limited. And Monolith Soft said, well, here's what we can do with this. So I feel that this new system is going to tie directly into what they're doing next, and their next codename project, Legacy, as what it's called. At least that's what the information that's coming out. And I personally feel that this is going to be a brand new IP, or it's going to be a new arc or saga of the Xeno franchise, Xenoblade, whatever they're going to call it next. And I think that they're really going to want to show what they can do with this game. And this honestly could be the game that finally gets them into an area that they haven't been before. Very similar to Intelligent Systems. Before Fire Emblem Awakening, they never had a game that even got close when it comes to like 2 million or 3 million in sales. But since Fire Emblem Awakening, they've had multiple 2 million plus selling games, and almost always sell baseline 1 million with a Fire Emblem game. Plus they had the ultra successful mobile game with Fire Emblem Heroes. So that was the turning point for them. Now with Xenoblade Chronicles, obviously they had Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition that sold 1 million plus. They had Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which sold over 2.5 million. They've had Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is sold about 2 million, and if you include Future Redeem, definitely over 2 million. So they've definitely had a good amount of success. But I feel that this next title could become their next big thing, to where it does jump up because the hardware catches up with some of their ambition and gets more people interested in potentially playing it, or they do something completely different from what we've seen before and make an RPG that has their qualities, but maybe a bit easier to play for people out there, but still retaining what makes Monolith Soft awesome. So I see nothing but bright things in the future for them. I do want to make a specific video later down the line what their new game could be, even though I've already made a couple of those. You can already check them out. But I do think that there's probably some more stuff that we could talk about when it comes to Monolith Soft and what they can do next. But I'm very interested in seeing what they have for us. Monolith Soft is my favorite Nintendo developer, and I cannot wait to see what they have for us for the Nintendo Switch 2. I think that we're going to see it somewhat early, if not at Nintendo's big Switch 2 presentation. They've done this before where they show whatever Monolith Soft is working on pretty early in the life of a new system. With the Wii U, Xenoblade Chronicles X, that was shown a number of months after the Wii U was launched. And then with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, we saw that in January 2017, which was months before, and they ended up launching it later that year. So I think that we'll see Monolith Soft's next title more sooner than later. But talking about the Nintendo Switch 2, let's transition into what Nintendo plans to do, because if you're going to have stuff like a new Xenoblade game or a new Monolith Soft major RPG IP, you're going to have a new Mario Kart game, probably a new 3D Mario, and with the popularity of the Nintendo Switch, there's going to be a lot of customers that are waiting to pick this system up. So what is Nintendo going to do to make sure that they don't have the same issues that Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo themselves have dealt with for decades now? And that is the availability of a new system when it launches and the scalping problem to combat that. Now, at a recent investor shareholders meeting, or at least speaking to the shareholders, Nintendo President Shuntaro Furukawa addressed this, which they've addressed this before, but they addressed it with a little bit more detail here, which makes me think that Nintendo has some alternative plans, because I've never seen another company say this before a launch. They all just kind of say, oh, well, we'll do our best, or we're going to try to manufacture more or whatever. But Nintendo threw in a little bit of extra sauce here that we don't normally see or hear from companies. So here's what Mr. Furukawa had to say. As a countermeasure against the resale, we believe that the most important thing is to produce sufficient numbers to meet customer demand. And this idea has not changed since last year. Okay, yeah. They've told us about that. We know about that. Every company says that. That's no big deal. That could just be like, whatever. Yeah, we know. But it's the next thing here that makes me think a little bit more about what they could potentially do, and they're taking this very serious. Here's the next thing. Quote, in addition, we are also considering whether we can take some other measures to the extent permitted by law, taking into account the circumstances in each region. So this is the first time that I've seen a console manufacturer mention potential laws or mention potential ways to what they can do outside of just making more units or trying to boost the production or trying to secure more chips or whatever the case is. We've never heard anybody say that, at least not Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo. They all just say, we'll try to do better. We're going to try to do our best. We'll do our best. This one is interesting because it looks like they're going to do things that they haven't done before. It looks like they're going to say, hey, okay, maybe we'll limit how many units you guys can actually get, how resale units are done. Now, obviously, laws are different everywhere, and I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, it would be tough to say, you can't resell this thing that you bought. That would be a very hard thing to try to stop overall, but my guess is that they're going to limit the amount of the units that they send to stores for pre-orders online and supply more on the day. So no, if you want a unit, you're not going to be able to pre-order 5 million of them with a bunch of bots and all that, because that's how this gets done. That's how people get all of these systems. And on top of that, I mean, the other thing is that there was a semiconductor shortage. There was a big problem. And that's the reason why with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series, it was hard to find for a while, because there was a massive shortage plus COVID. You had COVID and you had a semiconductor shortage. So that caused all sorts of issues and problems. With the Nintendo Switch, they were coming off the Wii U, one of their worst selling home consoles of all time. Actually, their worst selling main home console of all time. So they produced a modest amount of units. They didn't know how big of a hit or not this system was going to be. Obviously, with the Nintendo Switch being so successful and anticipated, and with the Switch 2 being so anticipated with the success of the Nintendo Switch, and it looks like they're going to have some big heavy hitters at launch, they know they're going to have way more units. But I think that what Nintendo's been doing with some of their software is a precursor to potentially what Mr. Furukawa is talking about. Because if you look at the pre-order situation that's going on with like Luigi's Mansion and how they canceled all of those, or Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, how they moved the day to Thursday. They're doing all these little things to try to stop the leaks, stop the certain things like that, right? Stop all of the week early or 2 weeks early. You're seeing the games leak online and be spoiled or whatever the case is, right? They're trying to stop that. So I think they're going to try to employ some of the same tactics in terms of potentially identifying who's having bots attack their sites whenever they try to pre-order systems. Best Buy had a pretty good run with the Nintendo Switch OLED and pre-orders and stopping the crazy bot attacks by queuing and doing other types of things. So I do feel that Nintendo's going to try to make sure that they don't necessarily supply 5 billion units for people to be able to pre-order. And if you want one, you have to go into the store. If you do that, then people can't scalp like crazy because there's no way they're going to be able to drive to 10 million different stores and get this Switch too. I mean, they could, but it's going to take them too long and they're not going to do that, right? Scalping really took off when it came to online and how you can just order a bunch of them and use bots. So I think that Nintendo's going to try to employ some tactics like that in order to actually make people, now that we don't have lockdowns and certain things that were happening, I think that Nintendo is going to do what they did with the games and make people actually go into the stores and have more of a limited amount of ones that you can actually just pre-order online, because that will kill it right there, guys. If you just say, hey, look, you got to go into the store to pre-order the system and they have a set amount, I think that would definitely be better. And then if you have a bunch on launch too, and then you limit the amount someone can buy, only 1 or 2 systems, then that can definitely cut back dramatically. Not completely kill scalping, but it could definitely cut back dramatically on the scalping issues that we've seen over the last number of decades, but especially with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. But what do you guys think overall when it comes to what Monolith Soft had to say, and of course Nintendo's plan to deal with Switch 2 scalping? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch and RPG videos right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.